And we're extremely excited to have as many of you here as we have today. We're super excited to have Andreas Ruzo with us. Yes! Andreas has become a close friend over the last couple months, and I'm not even going to tell you how many texts are on our text thread because we are constantly checking in with each other, and we've been so excited to work on this project with you guys and to bring you all in. We also have a whole lot of exciting explorers and scientists that we'll be working with. But for today, I'm going to turn the time over to Andreas, and we're going to let Andreas take it over and teach us a little bit more about field journals. So everybody, hold up your field journal. Let me see them.
All right. Check out those field journals.
And something to write with?
Kira, Mallory, can't see you yet, and a G, and then we have Mom. Mom phone.
Mom phone.
So Jackson B just sent me a chat message that says he can't hear anything.
Jackson can't hear anything?
No.
Well, it's probably on his computer, because can everyone else hear?
Yeah, I can hear.
Okay. We're going to have him check something on his end. All right, we're going to turn that time over to Andreas for now.
All right, let's do this. Well, I'm going to share my screen, so requesting to share the screen right now. So hopefully all of you can see my screen. I have a little PowerPoint ready to go for everyone. And can everybody see that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I'm Andres, and I'm so excited to finally meet all you guys. I have heard so much cool stuff about you, and this is actually really special for me for a number of reasons. We have an amazing group of scientists, of educators, of students, as you know, and hopefully parents too, that are going to be in all this. And before we get into it, I wanted to give a little presentation about what I do normally. So that's me in that picture, crossing that bridge. I mainly work in volcanoes and geothermal systems and do a lot of work in jungles. So what I do for my day job, I guess, is if anybody wants to, for example, organize a trip to the jungle. A lot of times they'll call me and I'll organize a trip to the jungle and make sure everyone, goes safely, respectfully, and gets out of there A-okay. The water that's actually flowing beneath me right there is about 186 degrees Fahrenheit. So about 117 degrees Fahrenheit, 117, you and I start to cook. So it's like if you go to drink some tea or drink some coffee or something, or hot chocolate, and, most of the time the water's at 130, 140 degrees Fahrenheit. So that water is definitely hot enough to kill you. And we are going to talk about a special thing, notebooks. I actually have, in fact, I've got so many of them here that you can choose your poison. I've got all the ones you want, like crikey. And there's some other ones. I've got notebooks for all sorts of things. These are the ones that I generally use. These are called Write in the Rains. They're actually waterproof, so it can be raining and the water will just fall off of them. And for example, I'm a host of a show on Nat Geo Latin America, and for example, this is some field notes on safety when dealing with American crocodiles, for example. And because sometimes it's not all just geology. Here's how to cook poisonous lionfish. That's an important one. So the point I'm trying to make is that even though I'm a geologist, you will see everything from, notes for social media stuff to recipes. If you need to write it down, it can be turned into a notebook. So we're going to be looking at the interconnectedness of Yellowstone. And what's really exciting about geology is, well, no pun intended, but geology rocks, as you obviously know. This is a big, beautiful rock. It's a fresh lava flow. This is actually, I was there shortly after the volcano erupted when we got this one. And what's cool about this is that there's an entire process, right? This rock eventually breaks down into sand, into soils, and then where do trees grow, right? Plants grow in those soils. Animals eat from those plants. Humans use those animals and plants too. Microbes help speed along the process. That the rocks, everything else deals with the water. So everything is connected. And in fact, I do a lot of archaeology work as well. And what's pretty crazy is, let's say that an alien shows up to Rexburg 1,000 years from now. They could go to your bones in your grave, and depending on the heavy metal concentrations in your bones, tell you where on planet Earth you were living, which is pretty crazy. And the idea is, you're drinking water, you're interacting with the environment, you are a part of your environment. So the environment leaves special signatures in your body because we are a part of our environment. And this is what I really hope to get into. I know you guys have to hang out with one of my best friends, Rosa. I don't know if anyone's in this picture. I see you, Miss Barton. So I'm so excited to get to connect with her. She's a dear, dear friend. We were in different classes, but actually we're associated with, I never went to school there officially, but all my friends were from there. But we went to the same high school pretty much, or associated with it in Lima, which was fun. And so Rosa is part of one of my collaborators for our team for the Boiling River Project. That's behind us is the Boiling River. We've got about 50 collaborators from all over the world, which is really, really fun. And, hopefully you guys can get out there too. And like I said, I mainly focus on geothermal science. So the heat of the earth, volcanoes, where Earth's heat came from. I do a lot of work in conservation, how to protect our special places on planet Earth, the things that give us life, quite literally, right? The things that clean our air, that clean our water. In this case, this is one of my great mentors. He's a shaman, a traditional healer and leader in an Amazonian community. Those are actually jaguar fangs around his neck there because he comes from a very, very long line of healers and leaders. So he's a very special guy. And how do we protect some incredibly special places? And actually, Yellowstone is globally important for conservation because, to summarize it, Yellowstone actually gave parks, wild spaces in the United States, the right to be wild. And that is absolutely amazing because, in fact, in the past, before I was born, certainly, they were talking about even, they need to put fences around all the geothermal systems in Yellowstone, or they need to collar all of the bears so we know where they are. Effectively, they're not wild anymore. So thanks to Yellowstone, we actually have the right to be wild for many spaces. I do a lot of science communication work, obviously with Nat Geo, with TED, Discovery, a whole bunch of other groups. And the idea is, how do we take all the stuff that we're doing in science and get it out there to mass audiences of adults? And also, I host a show. This one's called Misterios del Inframundo, on mysteries of the underworld, where we look at actually at a lot of interconnectedness about how the geology, the plant life, the animal life, archaeology, where everything blends together. You can see more of the stuff that I do online on the Nat Geo magazine. There are 2 magazines that I was featured in, and gotten to work with some really cool people along the way. But I think one of the most important things that we do at Nat Geo is actually work with you guys. As far as I'm concerned, every single one of you is a time traveler from the future. And I don't think you guys realize it yet. You are the future leaders. You are the face of the future of humanity. And I hope that you never forget how absolutely important each and every one of you are. In fact, I think right now, you individually in your home could arguably, I think, have a bigger impact than a lot of adults in the way that even right now and today, in how we interact and treat our environment. So it's essential, I think, to invite you guys to the field, invite you guys into real science, from here in the United States to different parts of Peru to the Amazonian communities that I work with. This is a really, really, really important part of what we do. And before we move on, I do want to highlight a little bit about the work that we do in the Amazon, just because it's a lot of fun. The Amazon basin is about 90% the size of the lower 48 U.S. states. So it's a huge area, just an absolute celebration of life. Wherever you go, something's buzzing, crawling, slithering. So it's a huge, huge area, as you can see there. And it is one of these hotbeds of biodiversity and a really special place. And what's cool is, Yellowstone is, for the United States, is a similar one too. You've got all these great things. Specifically, I work at the Boiling River, which is a really special place. It's the largest documented thermal river in the world. So max temp, well, it gets up to 187 degrees Fahrenheit at that point. Sacred place for the locals. This is a place of legends and spirits. The maximum temperature that I ever measured was over 210 degrees Fahrenheit. So you can see the bubbling waters there, which is pretty intense. The widest point is almost 100 feet wide. That's a 176-degree waterfall. I'm sitting on the top of it. Actually, I'm very proud of Rosa because Rosa, whom you met, there's a place called the Spider-Man wall. It's a vertical wall that you have to climb like Spider-Man to get to the other side, to get to our sampling site. And, well, it's close to this point right here. Rosa was able to do that successfully. At the deepest point, it's about 15 feet deep. So imagine how much hot water is there and how much heat energy it takes to heat up all this hot water. The river itself is almost 4 miles long. That's taken from a drone, that image. So that cloud is actually the steam plume from a drone. You can even see it from a commercial airline if you're sticking your head out the window. It's amazing. It is hot, so it is bubbling, and you got to be very careful. It is just under 100 degrees C boiling for a big chunk of the way, and which can mean a lot of things. One of them is that if you're a tea drinker, it's a great spot to drink tea. So the water's very, very clean. You can literally take it straight out of there. It'll have to cool down first, so you'll burn yourself. But you have instant tea. However, you do have to watch out because if you fall in, you die. And that is a very important thing dealing with volcanic systems, dealing with geothermal systems, dealing with Yellowstone. We don't go swimming in these superheated waters. Super important. Do not fall in. Very, very important. We're not going to get in areas where you should fall in. Don't you worry. But just in case, don't go swimming in a bubbling pool of water. It is a very bad idea. Some people forget that sometimes. But it's an amazing ecosystem. You have these massive trees. There's a guy for scale. Anybody know what that is? I'm going to pick on you because you're the first face that I see. What is that? It's a baby something. Talk to me, Adam. It's a cousin of the rhino.
Look at the tapir.
Yes, well done. Look at the feet. Look at the feet. Identical to a rhino's feet. So it's a baby tapir. That's one of my favorite animals in the jungle. They're so fun. That is a papazo, is what we call them in Peru. That's a type of rhino beetle that's the size of my hand almost. It was massive. How about this? Let's see who we're going to pick on. Capri, where are you? Tell me, what is that thing that could easily sit on my finger?
It looks like a frog, but I'm guessing. Is it like...
What?
I don't know what breed of frog. I knew what the tapir was. I wish you'd call me then, but I don't know what this is.
It's okay. It is a frog. You're absolutely right. And it looks like Malcolm knows. Malcolm, talk to me.
Sorry, it's a poison dart frog.
Bingo. It is a poison dart frog. So if I were to put that in my mouth, it would be the last dumb thing I ever did. So don't do that either. But that is a poison dart frog. Exactly. And if we move on, how about this guy? This is a baby something that's enjoying the warm waters of the boiling river in a warmer part. Oh, it looks like we got Walter and Grattan. Did I say your name right?
Grattan.
Grattan. Walter and Grattan.
Hi, sorry. It's a baby alligator.
Close. It's a cousin of the alligator. Starts with a C.
Crocodile.
Close.
Cayman?
Also starts with a C. Oh, who said cayman?
Cayman.
Well done. That is a baby cayman. And all of these animals are absolutely incredible. And I mention all of them in this incredible camouflage that you're seeing because if you are living in an ecosystem and you are a part of that ecosystem and you are interconnected with everything else in that ecosystem, just like that toad that you can obviously all see in that photograph. Did you guys see it? Jackson, do you see it? You're making funny faces at me. There you go. No, I'm kidding. But there's a leaf toad right there. That is some amazing adaptations that you see biologically, where these animals mimic their surroundings. That is an ecosystem that they are so much a part of that you see these modeled patterns, a line running down the middle in the camouflage of this frog to make it look like the center part of a leaf. I mean, it's unbelievable. Even the little holes mimic the dark spots, mimicking little holes. I mean, it's just beautiful. We are part of our ecosystems. We match them. The chemicals interchange within our bodies in the water that we drink and the food that we eat. So it makes it all the more important to understand the land that you're native to and understand our role in it. And that's one of the things I'm super excited about Yellowstone. Not only that, I'm also excited about the fact that Yellowstone also has a boiling river. It's much, much smaller, much, much colder, and not as hot as the Peru boiling river, but it's still pretty amazing. And I'm so excited to go there. It's been a couple of years that actually we've been battling on social media as far as like, who gets the hashtag, but that's a whole nother thing. I'm really excited to go there. And why am I mentioning all of this stuff? Because everything I just mentioned can be put in a notebook. In my field training, we actually have two kinds of notebooks. We start off with a field book, which sometimes, and I'm going to show you one of my worst ones, because, in fact, I'm going to show you my very messiest one. This is horribly messy. There's a bunch of scribbles. There's all this stuff. That's the field book that sometimes can get messy because you're writing things down fast. But then later on, for example, you'll take all that and write it in a really nice, neat way and organize all your notes and draw your nice pictures and write everything down. So I like to do the field copy and then the fair copy notebook. But the questions that I want to walk away with today are, what is notebooking? Why do we notebook? Who are we notebooking for? And what makes good notebooking? So I don't know. Right now, we're probably short on time at this point.
You got it.
We'll start with,
you go. You're doing great.
We'll start with what is notebooking. And notebooking is all about documenting observations. Observations, what you observe, what you smell, taste, feel. It's all super, super important. That's what this is all about. Good science is based on good observations. Any logical, reasonable conclusion like that, using the scientific method, is based on observations, real observations. It looks like we got a question from Adam. Let's go.
So this is more of a comment, but
yeah.
Notebooking is really just taking what you see and putting it in a place where it won't be forgotten in case you forget it.
Exactly. Bingo, bingo, bingo. So memory is not perfect. You're absolutely right. Super important to write things down because sometimes you forget. You know what? These days, especially, this can be a notebook. This can be a notebook, right? The phone. You can use just about anything as long as you're documenting it and documenting it very well. And it's funny, like I said earlier on, you can use these notes for pretty much everything. It's not just science specific. Anything that you do, from art to science, sports to mental health, whatever you can observe, any thoughts that you have, you can write it down. And the purpose of notebooking is, how do I best organize those thoughts, those observations? And it looks like Slades. Is that you? Did I get it right?
My name is Oliver. That's just I'm just using my dad's computer.
Good name.
Here's a question. How do you keep everything organized? Is sometimes hard to find, is it hard to find, information you've written down?
And that is a great question. So actually with this page that I'm showing you guys here, hopefully the little, can you guys see the grid of all of your faces on this?
Not right now. We're looking we're looking at your screen.
Oh, just at the screen?
Yeah.
So in this case, this is, it's method. How are you organizing yourself? One of the most important things, for example, is sometimes, put page numbers. That's a very basic one. Putting in the date where something is done. Like, for example, right here, cuttings collected on the 11th and 12th of August 2013. the field season that this is coming from, where you're getting all this information from, bringing it all together. Depending on what you're going to do, there are tricks and techniques to make sure, and we'll go into this in more detail later, that you are maximizing everything you can do to organize your stuff in a good way. So this is what this is about. So what's really cool is, right now we are, in science we talk, and I'll mention this later on too, science is definitely about discovery, but it's also about repeatability. How do we repeat things? And you see really important notebooks from different, really important people. Leonardo da Vinci, for example, brilliant scientist, brilliant artist. His notebooks are works of art. Jane Goodall, amazing stuff. This is Charles Darwin when he was going on the Beagle. And there's some really interesting things that come up here, right? And again, like, you don't have to write things down in notebooks. In fact, these days, I film almost everything first. These days, this is my field copy notebook, and this becomes my fair copy notebook. And I take everything that I have here, I'll put it into different online archives and files, and then put it there. Like, for example, this is a site at the Boiling River that's really, really weird, because that tree is growing next to a stream that's 190 degrees. So my two field assistants there are collecting water samples, and I needed to understand where's my GPS point, what's my elevation, and how many satellites am I connected to with my GPS. I could have written all that down, but it is so much quicker to just take a picture of it. And what I've learned to do over the years is not just take a picture of the actual GPS unit, but take a picture of the GPS unit in the context of where that is. Actually, one year, if there's any parents on this call, this is a friend of mine who, there's a show called The Amazing Race, and he's the host of that show. His name's Phil Keegan. And one of the things that I like to do as well is when I grab a water sample, like this one, I like to not only take a picture of the water sample that I grabbed, take a picture, if you notice, the number of the bottle, that case 10, a sort of identifier is there, visible. So this picture alone tells me what location did I collect this water sample from. I'm tying the bottle into the location and the person who collected the sample. So suddenly you can use a picture as a really quick way to take notes. In fact, I've seen people do that in presentations where they just snap a picture instead of writing down all the notes because it's so much faster. Why do we notebook? And I think we already kind of touched on this as well. Again, to document observations, we're documenting what we see. And what's really interesting here is, again, can't stress this enough, memory is not perfect. In fact, I was doing some work up at MIT in Boston, and I have a friend who's at Harvard. And this is kind of creepy, but he's a Nat Geo Explorer too, great guy. But they're trying to figure out how memory works. And one of the things that they found is how easy it is to manipulate memory. I almost put this in, but you can tell people can tell you, i.e. your brain, to focus on certain things. And your brain will only focus on that one thing. And a lot of times, everything around it can get fuzzy. So the better documentation that you have, well, the better you'll understand that complete picture. Because the concept of inception, for example, the concept of putting ideas in other people's heads or messing with memory is actually not science fiction. More interesting stories on that, but that's a whole nother can of worms. But anyway, the important thing is, if we want to avoid all that, if we want to stick to the empirical truths that we can see, that are repeatable, that will be there, that are real, right? We need to document everything, because that way no one can twist that information. That is there forever. If I do it, if Adam does it, if Ava or Silver does it, it's there, right? We make the same observation. So in this case, let's document some observations. Here's some fun ones, right? I showed you, for example, remember that thing I just said about focus? I showed you guys this picture. Obviously, there's something in that picture that wasn't there the first time that I showed you the picture. And I have a question for you. What color were the researchers' gloves? Because let's say, for example, 5 years down the line, when you are publishing your scientific paper, you learn that the gloves of a specific color, for some reason, let out a particular toxin that messes with water samples. Does anyone remember what color those gloves were? Oliver.
Were they blue?
Let's see. And they were blue. Well done. Oh, man. Good job.
A while ago, I took a course for improving your memory by, can't remember who put it on, but yeah, he had some interesting ideas like memory files, if that rings a bell.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I'm going to ask you a hard one and then an easy one. So what about this one? I showed you one of the most important diagrams in modern science. And this was, think the Galapagos Islands, Charles Darwin. He draws his sketch. And there's two very, very, very important words that are in the upper left-hand corner of this diagram. Grayton? I'm going to be so impressed with you guys.
It is Walter. Yeah, sorry.
Oh.
Stratton.
Sorry.
Was it, I'm trying to remember here. Wasn't it like Tree Branch or the Galapagos?
It's close. It's definitely describing, some of the observations that he did. But a really important part here is, and again, I didn't ask you about this. These are just examples of, and you guys just saw this stuff. Because, for example, while we were, especially when you work on a bigger team, like, for example, if all of us are out in the jungle and we're all collecting samples.
I can't read Darwin's.
What's up?
You can't read Darwin's handwriting. Yeah, even if I looked at the original picture, I probably wouldn't know if I can't read his handwriting. It's okay.
Look, I bet you if someone had asked me, I probably would not have been able to pick this stuff up either. The truth is, I'm asking very difficult questions here. I'll ask an easy one at the end, but I think it was that. It's that hypothesis of like, could this be, and then following it up, because it's important to think about what you're looking at. If you're making observations, think about it. One of my favorite scientists of all time, Alexander von Humboldt, one of his favorite things to do was say, I'm in the Ecuadorian Andes, but it reminds me a lot of the Alps when I was here because of the way that it makes me feel. A lot of scientists these days are not a fan of that, but he was really big on, if I feel a certain way, if something reminds me of something else, I'm going to write it down too. So I'm going to put, I feel like this. And only now are we discovering that actually can have some important scientific implications. There was, I'm blanking out on her name right now, but she's a female researcher out of New York who's always like, wow, I love flowers. Why is it that yellow flowers and purple flowers, why do they look so pretty when they're together? And they were like, oh, no, well, that's a dumb question, right, is what people told her. Until she started looking into it. And she found that the pollinators of those flowers have eyes that react in a similar way to humans. And when you have those two colors, here's a little color wheel. So a color wheel basically shows you all the colors and what colors are complementary and what are not and everything. If you look, purple is down here, yellow is up here. They're complementary colors. So they will stand out all the more. So basically the reason those two flowers look so good together is because there was an advantage in that ecosystem that we would attract more pollinators. So again, that's what are you observing? Sometimes you're there to study the geology and other questions come up. And in this case, just another fun question. This one should be the easiest one of all. Oops, I just told you the answer. How long was the Boiler River? Oliver, I bet you already knew that answer. But let's ask Capri because she hasn't answered the question.
It was 4 miles, or I think it was like 6.4 kilometers.
Nice. 6.24 kilometers. Good job. Almost 4 miles. You got it. And it's And again, like, memory is not perfect. You are all an exceptional bunch of kids. I've heard amazing things about you. And again, you didn't have to memorize all this stuff, but sometimes little details like that have to come up. So as we're talking about, the importance of documenting observations, good science, repeatable science is about good observations. And there's really, really interesting things here. Science is about new discoveries. It definitely is. And it's super important, but that's the part that gets the limelight, I think, a little too much. We forget that repeatability is just as important as those new discoveries, or if not more important. And repeatability is making sure things are actually what we think they are. Well, okay, if I were to drop this, it would fall to the ground and shatter. Oh, gravity is still on. Gravity still works, Like, that's repeatable. We can trust in that. So because of that repeatability, we can build on things that we've done before. So I'm going to fast forward. And one of my favorite examples of this is, anybody know who Marie Curie is? All right, Mallory, we haven't called on you. Tell me about Marie Curie.
She worked with radiation, I think.
Yeah.
And
these are her notebooks.
And aren't her notebooks still too radioactive? Like, you can't touch them with your bare hands?
This is somebody recently working with one of her notebooks. They are going to be radioactive for nearly 1,500 years. So think about that. Imagine if your notebook that you're working on now stays, number one, of scientific interest, where people are still going back 1,500 years later to review your notes. But it's pretty wild. Adam, do you have a question?
Yes. How did they get radioactive?
Oh, that's a great question. So this is off the topic of notebooking, but it's an important one as far as processes. So so I'm all about processes, and in good notes, you talk about your processes. So so to get the radon in particular, that book that you're seeing is full of, Dr. Curie would have to grab literal tons of Earth materials, right? Think rock, dirt, all that stuff. Grind it up and filter it out, and purify and filter and purify and filter and purify. So she was obviously breathing all this stuff in. She was filtering and purifying until she got, pure radioactive elements. And it is embedded in her books. It's embedded in the binding. And in fact, you see that in a lot of the work that she did. I mean, there's one of the Geiger counters, if you will, right there, right? So what's pretty crazy is that she was doing work in 1922. 100 years later, they're still using her notes because she had some great observations. Because a good observation never goes bad. If it's the best observation you can, it does not go bad. So what's cool is 100 years from now, there might be new people using those same notebooks. So the idea of notebooking is, when you're writing the notebook, one of the best tricks that you can do to make good observations is think about this. This notebook is not for me. This notebook is for the person that's going to be reading my notes in 100 years. I might be long gone. All of my other data might be long gone. But the idea is there's a continuity in science. It builds on top of itself. And if something changes, that might actually be a really important point to study. Oliver, you got a question?
Do you know when they who figured out it was radioactive? Did they just do like a test on it sometime and they thought, well, she did a bunch of tests on
they figured out pretty quickly that she most likely died from radioactive, what type of cancers and different sicknesses that were associated with radioactivity. That raised a big red flag. And they checked out some of her stuff, and effectively enough, they found that it was definitely radioactive. So, hopefully the stuff that we're using is not radioactive. That's a joke. That's a joke there. We're not using any radioactive stuff. Cool. What's even cooler though, if you think about how long good notebooking or good observations can last, there's a much, much older example. You can go back to the Romans, you can go back to other people, but I think the oldest example of a really, really good observation is over 30,000 years old. So imagine making an observation that someone in the year 30,022 is going to make. So scientists were struggling. There's a species called a cave lion, and these are much bigger than the African lions, and they lived in Europe, and they looked mean and big predators. They found their bones in caves, and people were wondering, what did these things look like? So in Chauvet Cave, which is in France, you've got murals and murals and murals of cave lions. And what they found was that both male and female cave lions didn't really have a big mane. So they were able to say, okay, based on these observations from people 30,000 years ago, we can figure out that, yeah, no manes. There are other, in this case, Paleolithic art, Neolithic art as well, earlier on, that shows animals that were extinct in some regions. For example, you see this in Australia with a lot of the First Nations peoples there, as well as even in the northern Amazon, in parts of Colombia, you have really ancient cave paintings that can give you hints as to what the environment was like from humans that were witnessing everything. So it's really wild that a good observation, even made 30,000 years ago, which is just an insane number, can still be just as valid today, which is really, really cool to me. So what makes a good notebook? This is at this point, repeatability, right? That should be the question. How easy it is for someone to repeat what you did. Can they follow it step by step? Almost, I like to think of it almost as a cookbook. What are your materials? Are you using a GPS? Are you using a compass? Are you using a thermal camera? What type of camera are you taking pictures with? What's the date? Who's making the observations? So those things make good notebook entries. So here's an example of a geologic notebook, right? You have different, this is exactly what these pages look like. It often starts with, who's the observer? You'll put that down there. What's the date? Who's the project for? Who's the client? In this case, the project is for Madison School District. This is Miss Barton's class. The location, Yellowstone. You can put a latitude and longitude. You can put a home address. What are the tools you're using? Where on earth are you, right? These all go into making it repeatable. The idea is, how can a person 100 years from now repeat exactly what you did and hopefully get some meaningful results? So if we were, for example, to look at ecosystems in your backyards, what type of ecosystem do you live in? Do you live in an area where you see more bees, you see more birds, maybe you see buffalo in your backyards? I'm not sure. We all live in different places, right? We have a lot of bullfrogs where I live and raccoons that, in fact, we put security cameras up recently and we figured out that the raccoons are like on our porch every night and they are hanging out, having a good time. But if something calls out to you about your own backyard, for example, take those notes. One thing that I'm doing right now, for example, I'm working on a praying mantis project, and every year, the first date that I see praying mantises in my backyard, I'll make a note of that, because that's really important, especially right now. One of the things, for example, that if we had more time and if all of you had shovels, one of the things that I'd be super excited about is, so back in 1976, as you know very well, the Teton Dam floods the entire area of Rexburg, where you guys live. Not the entire area, but a lot of it, as you can see from this map. All of this stuff was flooded. That event left clues behind. So you could technically go back here, dig a little bit into the subsoil, and if you cored it, which is basically where you grab a column of dirt, or even just dug a hole, trenched it, so you were able to see the layers, there's a very good chance that you will find a layer of mud in your own backyard from this event, assuming you live in this part of Rexburg. So that's the flood boundary, right? So there's a lot that you can document. It's a lot of fun, and thank you all for your time. I think that I'm excited to see you all in person.
Andreas, thank you so much. So, boys and girls, this is what we'd like you to do. We'd like you to pick a page in your notebook, any page you want, and we'd like you just to give an idea, like to others that don't live in Rexburg. Just record what your backyard looks like. And now let's use the word backyard real loosely. If you want to go down to the nature park and do it there, you could. If you want to do it in your own backyard, you can. But I would love to have you use the tools that Andreas said. And so let's pretend that 100 years from now, someone came to the spot that you choose, and you're going to put the location at the top of the page. And they're trying to imagine what it looked like 100 years ago. Can you write down enough information that they can envision what that spot looks like today? Okay, I see some hands up. Do you guys want to ask some questions? How about Grattan first?
We both have questions. Wait.
Okay.
So I was wondering, I can't really do much digging, so should I be looking for patterns in the rock, or see how the grass grows and stuff?
That's a great question. So I live in North Texas, and actually you can tell what rocks are under large parts of North Texas by looking at the plants living on top of them. In fact, there's an entire field of geology that looks at where botany, the plants, and the soils meet. In our area, for example, wherever you have in North Texas, and this is not for everywhere, but for North Texas, where you have limestones, you'll see a lot of prairie grasses. Where you see big post oaks, you have sandstones. Where you have mesquite trees, little shrubby trees, that's where you have shales. Can you guys guess why that might be?
Well, I think it's because different rocks can contain different metals and crystals and nutrients and stuff, and different plants thrive in different environments. So naturally, different rocks are going to support plants better. I was actually just about to say the same thing he did. Also, I did want to ask a question about the work you do in the Amazon.
Of course. Can you guys see my Google Earth?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
It's a tad bit laggy though.
Okay,
perfect. The mentor in the Amazon you had? He
Yes.
looks like he was from kind of an old tribe, was he?
The shaman.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely, he's definitely from a tribe. So he's Ashaninka is the name of his people. And so and if you look at the geology, actually, this is kind of fun too. So here's Rexburg. Here I believe they're called the St. Anthony sand dunes up here, right? There's Idaho Falls down there.
They're out my window.
Yeah, there you go. And then here you have some, these are lava flows. Depending on where you are, what's literally in your backyard or in your local park, or even if you wanted to do it in the school, you can learn a lot. And right now, especially, this is something that's really important too. Right now, it is almost 8 o'clock for me. The sun is starting to set where I live. It is sort of spring right now, so there's a lot more pollen. If I were to go outside, it is incredibly important to write down, all right, today is April 28th, Thursday, April 28th. The time is 7:51 p.m. And I saw some bullfrogs. The bullfrogs started croaking. Why is it important that I put the time? Oliver, your hand went up pretty fast.
Could it possibly mean like maybe the time of day might mean they want to signal something else, like how supposedly roosters in the morning they'll like whatever they do.
They crow, yeah. I mean, different animals, different plants, even microorganisms like the ones that I don't know who worked with Rosa last year or not, but even those have daily cycles. Humans have daily cycles. If you look at our behavior, so you can say most people that you talk to are going to be asleep at 3 a.m., right? And that's going to imply behavioral issues. So even if you've got a store, right? If you have a skateboarding store, how about this? We'll do it somewhere else. A surfing store. If we were on the coast, right? Would you want to be open at 3 a.m.? No, that's crazy because everyone's going to be asleep, and the only people that are going to be out patrolling the waves at 3 a.m. are going to be the sharks. No human's going to want to go swimming out there, or few of humans are going to want to go swimming out there. It's the same principle with animals, with plants, with microbes. So if you're going into your area, are you living on top of, for example, the people over here, it looks like they're living on top of fields that were converted to residential areas. That's interesting. What's in your subsoil? Did all of the flooded event sediments from the Teton Dam flood, were they stripped away? Are they still there? Are they still in the golf course? Yeah. I don't know where you guys live. This looks to be like some kind of quarry over here. Do you have any rock? Do you have soil in your backyard, or is it just rock? Yeah. I know some people that literally live on top of big rocks. Other people live on soils that you have to dig down before you get to a bedrock. What does your backyard look like? Something like that. What bugs do you see? What bugs do you not see? Do you see butterflies? Do you see pollinators? What birds do you see or not see at what time of night? All of that information, as crazy as it might sound, can actually be incredibly valuable. Pollinators in particular.
Hey, Andreas.
Butterflies.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I know some of the kids need to go because we've gone a little over time. So I want to be able to let anybody who wants to ask Andreas a question. Let's just see if we all understand the assignment. So somewhere in your journal, maybe you could write at the top of it, field journal practice. And get one page, go outdoors sometime in the next week, get outdoors and just record whatever you're seeing outdoors in whatever fashion you want. All right. So I'm going to get that out of their way. And anybody who needs to run because we went a little over time, you can just hop off and wave goodbye to Andreas. And those of you who have more questions, stick around and I'm sure he'll answer them. Andreas,
I will definitely stick around.
This has been amazing. Oh, you guys can't wait to be in Yellowstone with this guy, right? He's just fabulous. So anyway, I'm going to turn my recording off.